Welcome, everybody. This is two EdTech guys take questions, and like we always do, I try to use this caption situation in order to make it all the more easily understood what it is what we might be discussing back and forth, that kind of thing. We thank you for joining us. We love to kind of get together and share these ideas, and people send us questions, and hopefully we come up with some pretty good answers. At least they're answers we like. So hopefully, that carries over. So my name is Rushton Hurley. I work with Next Vista for Learning, and that is a little library of videos by and for teachers and students everywhere, free to use, free to contribute to, free to download from, all for a student audience, all screen content. My own little attempt to save the universe from ignorance, one creative video at a time. Woo, right there. And then there is this.
I'm Richard, and I have freetechforteachers.com, going on 17 years this year, writing a whole lot of blog posts about a whole lot of educational and technology tools.
Excellent. And so in doing this kind of two EdTech guys take questions, we're looking to provide answers. So if you've got questions, feel free to go to either of our sites, nextvista.org or freetechforteachers.com, and leave those questions for us for sure. So we've got a question from Karen this episode. So Richard, talk to us about Karen's question.
Yeah, so Karen asked, what are some good alternative search engines to Google? I remember reading about some you recommended, but can't remember where I read it. I remember one was good for searching math equations. Thanks so much for your help. I'm going to be teaching research to 7th graders next week. All right, so there's a lot to unpack in this question. So first of all, to get Karen's question about the math element out of the way, Wolfram Alpha is probably what you're looking for. Yes. Wolfram Alpha is a computational search engine, and so it handles math problems really well. That said, don't look at it as just a tool for math and science. It's also really great for quick comparisons of things in humanities. If you want to get a quick side-by-side comparison of, let's say, Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy, right? Type both their names in, separated by a comma, and Wolfram Alpha will give you basically fact sheets of the two side by side. And there'll be a little timeline at the bottom where you can kind of see where their lives overlap. Really handy way to get, kind of the bullet points, the key information about two topics all in one nice little place. It's a lot faster than searching Google for that same information, and it's probably faster than flipping through your textbook for it as well. So that's one alternative search engine. What else do you think is out there, Rushton?
So one that intrigues me is DuckDuckGo. Now, some of you may have heard about DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is a company that's very much about privacy, right? So they have a search engine, you can do that, but you can also download a DuckDuckGo browser. Now, why do we need privacy? Well, that's one of those questions that may be obvious and maybe not. Obviously, if you're doing searches on stuff related to medical conditions, for example, you may not want a set of ads to kind of get crafted related to something that you're concerned about with regard to a parent's medical condition. So being able to use a browser or a search engine that will allow you kind of some privacy on that front makes a certain sense. As we get farther and farther into what is often called the attention economy, the concerns about the privacy of data actually increase. So yes, people have been talking about these things. There have been laws in different places, Europe especially. Some places in the United States, California, for example. However, it is very much the case that there are a lot of companies out there that are very much about gathering your data as a way of making another few cents per person for the gajillion persons that they work with. So finding tools that respect privacy in some manner make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I should have started with mentioning that you should go to your library
Yeah.
and go talk to your teacher librarian or your public library librarian and find out what databases your school or your public library subscribes to that you can only get into if you have a login provided by that library.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff that kids can get to that's really good that they just won't even know about if you don't tell them that these databases exist. There's a On that note, there's a search engine called Get the Research that will provide you with some links to some of those databases. There it is. It's a small search engine, but again, one of those tools, if you don't show it to kids, they're never going to use it. And if you don't show them the value of academic writing, they're not going to use it again. On that note, I would say, with seventh graders, you can certainly introduce them to Google Scholar, right? Like some of the stuff is going to be like, you know your students best and know what their background is, their content area knowledge is, but there's some stuff that they can definitely dive into. And the Google Books search tool, not the Google Books for buying books, but searching within books, books.google.com has a huge library of scanned books that kids can search within without having to have a physical copy of the book. Really great for, you can do that view filter right there, Rushton, and say you want full view books, right? And so if you pick one of those books, you can then search within that book itself. You can use that search tool right at the top where you wrote Frankenstein, write something else. I don't know, monster. Every reference to monster shows up. Right? And that's the sort of thing that kids need to be shown in order to know that it even exists and use it.
You might want to say something about Archive and the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, I do want to say something about Archive. First of all, it's not really filtered. And by not really filtered, it's not. But there's a lot of great stuff that you could find in there. So depending on your students, you might, do a guided search activity with them in that. Older students, talk to them about, how they're using that tool. But, fantastic stuff available there, including the world's largest archive of Grateful Dead recordings, free to listen and download.
Righteous. Yeah, I would say that, when we think about the archive, the archive is about the issue that the internet is changing regularly, right? And so if you have published something somewhere and you have cited a web page, which happens all the time, there's no guarantee that by the time somebody reads this article, they're going to be able to follow the link to that source and get the same thing that the author did. And so one of the reasons that the Internet Archive exists is to try to archive the internet. And so the story of the Internet Archive is a very interesting one, but very much in that space that Richard was just talking about. If you are at all concerned about kids, kind of getting about stuff that wouldn't normally be, say, acceptable material in class, then you might want to hold back.
Yeah. One last little thing about the Internet Archive. One of my favorite social studies teacher activities for this, talking about events that were current to you and I, and those of you watching us, but were prior to the existence of our students today. Right? Mm-hmm. So stuff that happened before they were born, but it's kind of current event-ish. Go to the Internet Archive and go to CNN.com for September 11th, 2001.
Nice.
Look at how that news was reported that day.
Yeah.
And then do contemporary reporting on September 11th, right? Like do those comparisons. I used it with some kids in an auto tech program, actually, to go back and look at ads from the 90s for various Chevrolet produced vehicles.
Cool.
and how those were marketed. It was it's fun. You can go back and look at that stuff. Cool.
So all in all, a great question from Karen, and we'll extend it with the cool share that we've got from Richard this episode, because this has to do with searching related to images. Richard, talk to us.
Yeah, so I think it's important for any student who has a cell phone like this one to know that any picture they take has a ton of data that goes along with it.
Yes.
And one of the good ways to show them that there's a lot of data connected to their pictures is to use a tool that shows them that metadata, or the EXIF data view. There's a lot of tools out there that will do this. Jimpl.com is one that I've used. Take a picture that you own, upload it, and it will reveal all the hidden data that's behind it. Like in that slide there, if you used that picture, if you had that original picture there, I've stripped the metadata out of the one that's in this slide. But if you had the original, you would find out exactly where in the world I was when I took that picture, and what day I took it on, and what kind of phone I used to take it, and whether or not I had filtered the image, and whether or not I had the exposure, what had the exposure set on, and whether or not the flash was turned on. Tons of information you can find out from that metadata that's hidden behind that picture.
Richard, when you talk about that, stripping the metadata from the picture, is just given general privacy concerns about physical location, are you in the habit of stripping metadata for any image that you upload?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I do it for images that have me or my kids in them.
Yes.
Right. Or images I've taken around my house. Right. Things like, it doesn't take a huge internet detective to figure out where in the world I live. But I try to put some parameters around where the neighborhood is, that sort of stuff. So
it makes sense. We got into a very good discussion before we started the recording about the challenge of finding the original image of an image that, for example, appears on Pixabay or Unsplash and then gets used on 50 different blogs. And so you should know that Richard did a really good tutorial on using image source information. You can find that on his YouTube channel, which we'll talk about towards the end of our recording. But knowing what you can get to and what you probably can't is probably a good thing. And Richard, I think, very wisely said, this could be a time black hole trying to find the original image of one that's been used many, many times. Am I characterizing that well?
Yeah, that's a good characterization of it. And I would also throw in that there is a lot of email scams going around where people will say, hey, you used this image, the link to the image, and say, but you used it without permission, and we need you to link to XYZ page as retribution for it, right? And you can quickly go back to the Internet Archive, for example, or you can go back and do a reverse image search and say, no, I got the picture from Pixabay, or I got it from Unsplash, and here's the information on the usage rights. I'm using it correctly. Go pound sand.
Well, do you actually go to the trouble of replying to the person, or you just hold that information in case somebody
depends on my mood.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do. I have done speaking of my YouTube channel, I've done a couple of videos about how to reverse engineer those scams, just to show hey, this is, this is a scam.
So, and if somebody's on your YouTube channel and does a search on scam,
yep, it'll pop up.
Perfect. So there's also this.
Images. Yeah, so this is just speaking of pictures, this is just kind of an interesting one. Stephen Venables, first British climber to climb Mount Everest without oxygen back in 1988. Climbed with a guy named Ed Webster, who passed away this past fall, who was from Maine, like me. And he has been recreating their journey from 35 years ago with pictures he's uploading to Instagram. So it's just kind of, if you're into mountaineering, into Everest, or you just want to see some cool pictures and some interesting stories, check him out on Instagram, Stephen Venables, and he's been recreating over the last month this epic expedition to Everest. They were the first to climb the east face without oxygen, a team of only 4 people. It's pretty cool story.
Nicely done. And speaking of cool stories, those of you who follow my newsletter and stuff, you know that I've been posting weekly during the school year, or at least the North American Common School year, to a thing called the Next Vista Inspiring Video Series. And the idea is to get a short video, one that's really interesting in some fashion, add some prompts that you can use in class for discussion or writing, or maybe you just like to see a couple of thoughts on a cool video and watch a short cool video, which is perfectly good. And this one, called The Angles of Art, is the one that I posted for this week. And it's one of these where lots and lots of different pieces of all kinds of things are hung, and you have to actually kind of get to a particular place to look at it in order to see the art piece as it is. And in some cases, if you are here, you see it one way. And if you go like 90 degrees off over here and look at it this way, there's something else. And the artist has done a lot of really cool pieces on this. The Angles of Art in the NVIV series. So nextvista.org/NVIV. Feel free to give that a look and share it around. And that'll give me an extra, 3 to 5 views this week, and that'd be great. So there's your link, nextvista.org/NVIV. If you have any questions about any of that, there's quite an archive there. Feel free to kind of jump in. The newsletter. I put out a newsletter at nextvista.org/newsletter, and every month I give away like a little Starbucks card, because that's kind of fun to do. It's just fun to do. And very few people that I send this newsletter to actually enter. Just saying, do the math. So good stuff there. I've written some books. If you're curious about these, take a look. The proceeds help my nonprofit, so all good there. And then there's this cool thing.
You can check out the Practical EdTech Handbook. Subscribe to my newsletter. I don't give away Starbucks cards, but you do get a copy of the Practical EdTech Handbook, 50 pages of some of my favorite EdTech tips and tools. Check that out. You can go to my YouTube channel, and you can watch all kinds of videos on all kinds of things, like the ones we already talked about. Follow me on Twitter. Send me an email.
Definitely. And for those folks who were thinking about like the tutorial we talked about earlier, bit.ly/RMBYouTube, all one word. We'll finish with a little reference to my nonprofit again, nextvista.org/contact, where you can get on and you can send questions. You can also send questions to Richard. If it's a really, really kind of annoyingly kind of intensive question, send them to Richard. He's all good there, but we're both happy to take them. We love getting the chance to explore these ideas together. We hope that over the course of the episode, you've had a few ideas that might be fun for you, and that you will also watch our newsletters for word of when the next episode will come out. We tend to do these monthly, but it's more as the spirit moves us, and we have fun doing it. So there you go. So with that, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.